Luca is a great example of a character-driven storyline. A character-driven story, very basically, is Act 1, a character establishes a pattern and has a goal. Act 2, the character tries to achieve that goal but faces obstacles because of their pattern. Act 3, the character either achieves their goal by changing their pattern or stays consistent with their pattern and changes their goal. And Luca does this so simply, so beautifully, so well. So this video is actually 3 videos. This is number 1, and you'll see 2 more. I tried to film this video twice last summer, and both had elements that I really loved. So I'm just gonna put them together to give you the full picture. And the first thing I'm going to do to explore this character-driven storyline is explain it through the lens of Luca's character arc. I'm gonna walk you through the plot and describe how each element of the plot aligns with his character arc and how that pays off. So let's get started. The first shot you have of him is him screaming. It is juxtaposed right after humans seeing a sea monster and being like, what a monster, and being afraid and running away, and then we see Luca screaming. He's a shepherd who was bored of his life, and he sits down on a rock and he's blowing bubbles, looking at his reflection and seeing his teeth and sighing, clearly displaying that he doesn't really like that he's a sea monster. And there's a bunch of stuff all over the ground. And he finds like a card with a man on it and the alarm clock and a wrench. He's going back and forth between curiosity and hesitancy of this human stuff. He's like collecting it. Suddenly a boat goes by and he hides. He's like, land monsters. Isn't that cute? Land monsters. But he hides with all the stuff like really close to him. It's fun. It's like a little dichotomy of like he's literally afraid of them, but he is very protective of their stuff. He collects all the fish and they hide together. But then he starts to daydream about maybe I could reach the surface of the water and go meet a human. But even in the daydream, he's like stuck. The water crests over his head, but he can't break it. And then he's snapped out of his daydream by his mom calling him to lunch. His mom is like, did you see any land monsters? Did you hide from them? They're dangerous. Kind of like rolls his eyes. He asks, where do boats come from? And the mom immediately is like, no, we don't even ask about that. And the grandma's like, yo, they just come from the land monster town. You know, I've been there a few times. Luca's all excited. He's like, oh, you've been to the human town? You've made the change from sea monster to human? And then she's like, yeah, lots of times. And the mom's like, don't encourage him. But Luca is encouraged. He goes back to work, he collects the wrench and he collects the glass, and then he finds a gramophone. He finds the handle and he's like trying to like see where it goes. And he is approached by this scuba diver with a harpoon, and he's like, no, like this is what they've warned me about. The scuba diver removes his mask and he's like, calm down, I'm not human. And it's another little sea monster boy. I'm just here for my stuff. He collects all the stuff that Luca had found on the ground and he's like swimming away. Luca is like following him because the new kid takes his shepherd's staff and is like, ooh. And he follows him all the way to the shallow water, and the other boy just gets right out of the water and walks onto the land, and he's like, what the heck? He just walked onto the land. And then the other kid hooks around him with the shepherd's hook and pulls him onto the land, and he changes into a human. And he's like freaking out. He's like, feels like he's gonna die. He's like, I can't, what's going on? I've never, you know, like the land is so daunting. The new kid is just like, calm down. And they look around and it's like, oh, I'm okay. Luca realizes what's going on and he's like, I shouldn't be here. Goes back into the sea. The boy hands back the shepherd hook and Luca's like, thank you, good day. And then goes under the water, but then comes back up and is like, good day. Like he's like, I kind of want to stay up here a little longer, but I know I shouldn't. And he's like, okay, now I'm leaving. But then the next day, he's like trying to breach the water, but he can't. And then the other kid comes up behind him. He's like, that's really sad. Just come on to the land. And so then They both go onto the land. Luca is not forced onto it. He's doing it on purpose. The boy is like, I'm Alberto. I live up here. I collect human stuff. Clearly, Alberto's like collecting these piles of junk and just like throws it on the ground. Like, he's very flippant about how much human stuff he has. And Luca's like, wow, human stuff, that's crazy. He lives in this little like tower on this island. And Alberto's showing him around. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty much an expert on human stuff. Breathing, walking, trees, air, birds and stuff. Like, it's great. And Luca's like, wow, so you can teach me about it. And then he's like, yeah, sure, I'll teach you about it. I love teaching people stuff. Alberto teaches them how to walk. Like, Alberto is like very confident at directing, but he is not good at literally telling him what to do. Eventually he gets it and Luca can walk and he's like, hooray, like, and they like celebrate together, like, hooray, yeah, I taught you how to walk. And Luca's like, yeah, cool. We can see how Luca has like these ambitions, but he needs someone else to tell him what to do, kind of thing. Like, he can't like break it. He needs somebody to like push him along, and having Alberto like literally pull him onto the land. You know, like, you see him learning and resisting. He doesn't, once he gets on land, he is not automatically like, hooray, and now I will play on the land. No, it's like he has to train himself. He is pulled on by someone else initially. The second time he needs encouragement, but he does it on his own, and then eventually he just can do it. But it's slow, it builds. They go up to his little hideout. He's like, my dad's gone most of the time, so like it's way fun. I can do whatever I want. And Luca's like, wow, that's so cool. You have all this stuff. He's looking around at everything, and Alberto has the gramophone on the table. He's like, it doesn't work. So busted, I guess. And then Luca fixes it for him. He's like, whoa, that's so cool. And Luca's looking around, seeing like posters. There's a poster of a Vespa. He's like, what is that? Because it looks very glamorous. Alberto's like, oh, well, that's a Vespa. Like, you can go anywhere you want if you have one of those. And Luca's like, wow, so that means like having a Vespa means you're free. And then Luca's like, are you gonna build one? Because you got a lot of stuff here. I think you have all the parts for one. Alberto's like, yeah, I'm gonna build one. Of course, yeah, that was the plan, of course. So then they have a huge montage of them building this Vespa together out of like coat hangers and scrap metal. And Luca keeps saying like, oh, I gotta go home soon. 45 minutes later, he's still there working on it. 45 minutes later, he's still there again. You see like this shift happening with Luca being like, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I really don't want to do that. I know that this is an okay place to be. Like, I feel safe and encouraged here. I know that this place is okay, but I'm told that it's not. So I have to go home. So we have this shift. So at first, Luca is full sea monster. He is discouraged to even think about being a human by his mom. It's just very taboo to even talk about it. And then we meet Alberto. He is both human and sea monster. They have montages of them jumping into the water, coming out of the water, building a bike on the land, and then diving into the water. They just flip back and forth very easily between sea monster and human on this island together. Luca keeps spending an increasing amount of time there because he's super happy. He gets to live out his little dream. He gets to build stuff. He gets to learn new things. He gets to be a human in a safe environment with another sea monster boy. Throughout their time together, Alberto is very headstrong. He's very confident. He's very like action, action, action. And Luca is very, let's think through this. You know, he's very hesitant. He's very scared. So they provide good balances with each other. Alberto's kind of action to a fault, like he does stuff without thinking. And Luca thinks too much, so he doesn't end up doing anything. So Alberto tells him, like, to quiet the voices in your head, just say Silenzio Bruno, and then you can, you know, proceed. Alberto wanted them to drive down a ramp on the Vespa they built and launch off when they rode the bike together, and they said Silenzio Bruno and just went down the hill. That was the most successful journey they had on that bike because they were Together, they helped each other out. Luca's presence kept the bike together. Alberto helped them actually just go for it. And then together, they flew, and they were like flying for a bit. But then they almost hit a rock and crashed, so Luca had to break the bike apart, and Alberto landed on one side of the rock and Luca landed on the other. That instance showed both the benefit and the bad side of thinking and acting like on both of their ends. If they went with just Luca's plan, they wouldn't have flown. But if they went with just Alberto's plan, they could have died because they could have crashed on the rock. It's showing that they both have benefits and they both have limitations to how they do things. And they are human on the bike and they are fish when they land. It's great. So he doesn't find any harm in it, but he spends too much time alone and his mom starts to get suspicious and notices like the classic trope of putting a dummy where you're supposed to be standing when you run away. So then she gives him a stern talking to. She's like, what are you doing? You can't leave all the time. It's not safe. I don't trust you. If you're gonna keep leaving, I'm sending you away to live with your uncle at the bottom of the sea. And he's like, this is a fate worse than death. The bottom of the sea? I'm trying to get onto the surface. I'm trying to get onto the land. What are you talking about? And even in his daydreams about what life could be like when he's with Alberto, he's flying. When they get their Vespa to finally work together, they fly through the air with the birds. In his fantasies, he's flying so high, he reaches the stars. But in this case, Alberto thinks the stars are sardines. Alberto's limited for what he knows too. And Luca's like, that sounds amazing. We can go even into space together, you know? So this bottom of the sea thing is horrendous. So him and Alberto decide to run away to the human town. And Alberto's never been there. He's always been on the island. He's kind of afraid to go. And also he's got really no reason to go. But now that Luca needs to be somewhere far enough away that his parents won't find him, because Luca's parents hate humans, he's like, well, he probably won't follow me there even if they could find me. On the way there, Alberto is jumping in and out of the water, transforming back and forth between human and fish. Luca's trying to follow suit, but he's really bad at it. He's like human, stiff, crashes into the water, fish, super good at gliding. Like he views them as very separate things. He is either full human or full fish, and Alberto's like kind of showing him to transition in between the two. They go to the town. Alberto is very, very confident that he knows what to do. He walks in with gusto, and Luca is very hesitant. And they heard some humans say on the island, like, what's wrong with you, stupido? Alberto's like, oh, we'll just say that to people. That's what humans say to each other. At first, like, when Alberto says it to someone, nothing really happens. He just gets like a funny look and the people walk away. But he's like, okay, great. So Luca, you say it to these women. And then he does, like hesitantly, and the women dump their gelato on their heads. And Alberto kind of sees this as a little bit of a win, but Luca's like, that wasn't right. That's a bad response. And it's like his wheels turning. He sees harpoons everywhere. He sees anti-fish stuff everywhere. A person killing a sea monster is the fountain. He feels very, very aware, very unsafe of this town. He was taught his whole life to live in fear. He is seeing the evidence everywhere around him. So he's like, we have to remain undercover. Like, we cannot let people know that we are fish. And Alberto's like, not that worried about it. He's just like, I know what to do. Just follow my lead. These kids are just playing soccer in town. And this boy comes in on this little Vespa. And they're like, wow, Vespa. So it's true. Vespas are here in the human town, like real ones. Then they accidentally kick the soccer ball and hits the Vespa and almost crashes to the ground. Now, Luca and Alberto are on this bully's list. Like, get out of my town. You almost destroyed my Vespa, you know. And you dress badly. And you smell weird. You smell like fish, you know. Even though it's a fishing town, probably everybody smells like fish. And that's probably part of it, right? So they're getting harassed by this guy. Then this girl comes in on her bike, And she's just like, leave them alone, you know? And she pulls them away to the side of town. And her dad is a fish guy. I don't know. He's a fisherman, salesman, fishmonger guy. And so she smells like fish too. And she's like, you guys seem a little weird. I'm a little weird. We have to stand up for each other. And the girl and the bully were arguing about something called the Porto Rosso Cup. And the girl is saying, I'm gonna win this year. And the bully, his name's Ercole. And Ercole is like, you can never win the race. You are really bad at racing and you always, throw up when you race. So, you have no chance, like why even bother? And the girl's name is Julia. And she's like, I will win the race and I will put an end to your dictatorship reign over this town. Like, I will fight for justice. So she's really, really like headstrong. She's like, I can do it alone. And she doesn't have, like, she is alone. They get away to safety. Luca tells Alberto, like, can you ask her, like what you win at this bike race? This sounds intriguing. And then Julia's like, you win prize money. And then Alberto like gives up. He's like, that's not a Vespa. What the heck? Prize money, who cares? And then Luca's like, ask her if prize money can get you a Vespa. He's still not just asking her himself. He's like, Alberto, you ask, please. It's another facet of Luca like knowing what to do, but not having the confidence to do it. And then Alberto's like, fine. Julia's like, yeah, I can get you a Vespa, but just not a very good one. And Alberto and Luca are ecstatic. They're like, I don't really care. It's better than whatever we made. It's a Vespa. It's freedom. It's everything we want. But they don't know what they're doing. Like, she explains that the race is eating pasta, swimming, and riding a bike. Luca tells Alberto, like, hey, maybe we can join her team, because since it's 3 different events, because she's alone and she keeps losing her race, that's all implied. But also, it's a key to the Vespa, or it's a way to the Vespa. Alberto is like, I got a better idea.
Girls,
Santa mozzarella.
congratulations, you're joining our team.
And she's like, what? Like, what makes you think you'd be good teammates? And then he's like, okay, yeah, so just lose alone, I guess. And she's like, okay, yeah, good point. Show me what you can do. So then they have Luca try to ride a bike. Alberto is coaching him. He's like, attack the bike, but he keeps falling off. He keeps being wobbly and falling off. Julia's like, gosh, just keep your eyes up. Looking down is making you fall. And so then Luca looks up and he can ride the bike and he's so excited. Alberto was super confident about it, but it was not good advice. And Julia's advice of trusting yourself and looking forward worked. Oh, how we have a little pin of jealousy in Alberto's mind now, because Alberto was proven wrong. And Luca is more in it just to be like, hooray, I can ride a bike. That means we can get a Vespa eventually. And Alberto's like, yeah, but I want to be the one who knows what to do, and that's starting now. Woohoo! And Julia is somebody who can teach Luca more. So this whole time, Luca has this mindset. He wants to be free. The Vespa equals freedom. Being with Alberto equals freedom. He doesn't want to be stuck as a sea monster, yada, yada, yada. That's his goal. He's like, anything that gets me freedom. Alberto's kind of in him with that. Like, he's like, the Vespa means freedom. But mostly Alberto, so far, he's just like, I just want to hang out with you. Like, we could hang out on the island. We could hang out on the town. I want to hang out with you. And so now we already have this conflicting motivation. In order to test how good of a bike rider Luca is, Julia has him go through different kind of obstacles, like beratement. Like, she yells at him and makes fun of him on the bike or stands in the way, and then she has him go over some planks over the fountain in the town square. This fountain is very significant. 1, the middle of the fountain is a statue of a man killing a sea monster. 2, if Luca goes into the water, he outs himself as a sea monster. And he just learned how to ride a bike. He rides up the plank and tries to go over the fountain, but the fear of the water is so strong that he falls off. Since he's not very good at riding a bike, Julia asks Alberto, like, what can you do, Can you guys swim, maybe? Because you're not very good at riding a bike. And Alberto's like, I'm an excellent swimmer. Luca nudges him. And he's like, oh, no, I'm, like, really, really bad at it, actually. Luca is so aware of not being outed as a sea monster, and he is kind of training Alberto to be the same. Because Alberto's very, very open about it. You know, he's lived on the island for so long, and he can just go back and forth between human and sea monster whenever he wants. You know, he's fine with swimming, he's fine with walking, he's fine with learning about human stuff. But Luca is hyper vigilant about being not a sea monster in this town. So he tells Alberto, like, no. But Julia's like, but you guys seem like you're really passionate. You have the hunger. And Alberto's like, I'm like always hungry. She's like, okay, great. I'll swim. Alberto will eat the pasta in the eating contest. And Luca will ride the bike. They need to get the entrance fee from Julia's dad. And Julia's dad's big and scary. He is a fishmonger, a fisherman. He is literally chopping up fish when they walk in. He's got harpoons on the wall. And so they're scared. He is so shocked by this anti-sea monster stuff. He spits his water in, and Alberto transforms a little, and he, dries them off really quick. Luca is constantly shown to be hyper aware of this. Alberto is constantly shown to be, like, fine with who he is, you know? The next few days, they're all training for the Porto Rosso Cup. And during that time, there are a few instances where the boys get water splashed on them, or it rains, or whatever. There's a part where Ercole comes out in his boat while Julia's practicing swimming. Luca and Alberto are in their own little boat. Ercole turns the boat and the water splashes. Luca ducks and Alberto doesn't. Luca's very, very aware. He is very, very afraid. And then Alberto is just kind of like chilling. He's like, what's the problem? But like, he's aware because Luca's training him. He's aware because he's, not stupid. He can like see what's in the town. But like, he's comfortable with himself. Like he's not like on edge about who he is. Kind of almost to a fault in Luca's eyes. There's a significant part where everybody is signing up for the race. And Ercole is telling them, like, don't even bother signing up because I'm gonna win. He's just being a jerk like normal. And Luca's like sick of it. And then he calls him a catfish who has little whiskers and he's a bottom feeder. Ercole's livid and he's like, sign up for the race and I'll just show you how much you'll lose. But this is significant because one, Luca's finally using his voice, but he used his voice to be anti-fish, which is interesting. Like, that's a little bit of food for thought. He used being a fish as an insult. What's this town doing to you, boy? It's making you more confident, but it's also making you anti-fish. While they're in the town, Luca loves to hang out with Julia. Julia's like into science and into astronomy, and they have a moment where they explain why they want to win the race to each other. So Luca explains, like, I want the Vespa so Alberto and I can, be free together and go wherever we want and sleep under the fish. And Julia's like, I'm the new kid in town every summer. I'm never accepted. I just want to win to show that like I deserve to be here and rub it in everyone's face. Both of them are a little confused about each other's reason for winning their race. But Julia hears Luca say that he wants to sleep under the fish, and she's confused. She's like, those aren't fish, those are stars. She shows him a telescope. She explains, like, I learned about this in science class. I go to school, and at school we learn all about astronomy. We get textbooks and everything. There's an even bigger telescope at school. It's like super cool. So this gets Luca all excited about like going even further. Like he was flying on that Vespa. In these daydreams, he's flying on these little like Galileo type planes. And then he also has the daydream of like going to space, but like with real stars and real planets, not just sardines. So this is mind blowing for him. Alberto comes back and he sees that they're bonded. He gets mad. He's like, Luca, come with me. I'm gonna show you what we're working so hard for. So he goes down the street, shows him the Vespa, and like, this is what we're here for. And the bullies encounter them in the street, and they're like, get out of my town, and push them against the wall. To protect himself, Luca grabs a trident, an anti-fish weapon used against him and his people. That gets the bully to leave. Luca explains to Alberto, like, you can't just like do whatever you want. It's not safe. And Alberto's like, I had it covered, I'm fine, but Luca is seeing Alberto's like inclination to action before thinking as a hindrance, and he is increasingly growing more like hesitant of him and veering towards this human culture. You know, like it's kind of a coincidence that there was a trident in the alley, but not really, because this is a fishing town and he's becoming pretty anti-fish, you know, anti-sea monster, just like the others. You know, not super straightforward, but he's getting there. Alberto's becoming more and more leery that like Luca is straying away from him. So then we have this moment where Luca has been training for this bike race for a while, and he has one problem. He is scared to go down the last big hill of the race that gets you to the finish line. Julia is explaining like, well, just, you know, take it slowly, be confident, you can do it. And Alberto's like, no, you just have to go for it. Like, don't listen to her. Then the train goes by. And Julia's like, that's the train I take to school. And Luca's like, can anyone go to school? And Julia's like, yeah, there's like tuition, but you know, anyone can go. This is like the last straw for Alberto. He's just like, that's dumb. Who cares about your dumb train and your dumb school? Like, we're winning the race together, and in order to do that, we need to get down this hill. Jumps on the front of the bike and just guns it down the hill. Luca is like, this is not safe, like you have to slow down. And Alberto's like, just Silencio Bruno. And he's like, I don't think it's Bruno, it's just me. So this is showing that Luca is not thinking out of fear. He is using his proper judgment in this situation. I mean, he's done so many things, you know, like he can learn about space, he's made friends, he's successfully hid his sea monster parts of himself from everybody in this town all this time. You know, like he's really good at it. He's very capable. He's not living in the same fear that he was. Though he's got a new fear. He's got a fear of being found out. He's got a fear of being seen as a sea monster. So they're racing down this hill. They fly over a cliff and into the water, just like they did on the island, but in a bad way now, and on a bike instead of the thing they built. Alberto and Luca are in a big fight. They walk out of the water, they are fully human when Julia comes down and sees them, and she sees that it's tense, but she's like, hey guys, I mean, everything's okay. Like, I'm not mad at you for taking my bike. Just maybe don't, you know, don't ride it over a cliff next time. What's going on down here? But like, I'm not mad at you. And Luca is like, everything is fine. And also, I want to go to school. And Alberto's like, no. Hey, Julia, can sea monsters go to school? And he walks into the sea, revealing that he's a sea monster. And Julia's scared. Like, Luca's been afraid this whole time of being seen as a sea monster. Everyone's hypervigilant in the town about these sea monsters. It's in the newspapers that there's been sea monster sightings because it's been them swimming around. You know, like before. They were swimming around the island before. The Ercole is like hunting them in the sea right now. And now that Alberto has shown that he's a sea monster, like out in the open in front of their friend, threatening Luca's chance to go to school where he really wants to go, it's threatening his freedom even more, because like before, Alberto was like this beacon of hope, this beacon of freedom, this beacon of friendship, of discovery and new opportunities that he never had before. Like he was flying with him. And now he can fly with Julia, and he's like, and I can fly even higher as a human than I could as a sea monster. And so then he turns on Alberto and he's like, points at him and yells like, sea monster. And Alberto is crushed. Alberto's just trying to show Luca like, you're not a human. Like, he did it in a bit of a nefarious way, but it's true. Like, he's not fully human. He is a sea monster. And Luca rejects him. And Alberto leaves, crushed. And Luca and Julia go back to Julia's house. And Julia is suspicious. And she tosses some water on Luca's hands and sees that he transforms. And she's like, how did I not see it before? You said you were sleeping under the fish. Like, you can't be here. Like, my dad, like, hunts sea monsters. Like, it's not safe for you. And Luca's like, but I have to be here. Like, I can't go back home. Like, they'll send me away. Like, they'll send me to the bottom of the sea. That's, like, the worst thing ever. But Julia is afraid for him. Like, she doesn't hate him for being a sea monster, but she's, like, concerned for him. Luca's like, what am I gonna do? You know, what am I gonna do? He goes and knows where Alberto will be because, you know, he only has one other place to go. So he heads over to the island and finds Alberto there. And Alberto's like, get out of here. And Luca's like, he sees the Vespa poster has fallen and there's a bunch of tallies on the wall, and he's like, what is that? Alberto says that he's been counting the days since his dad left, and eventually he stopped counting and put the Vespa poster up over it. And he's like really sad. He's like, he never came back, and you'll probably leave too, like leave with Julia. You're gonna go off to school and I'm just gonna be alone again, and it's probably for the best. I just mess up everything. And Luca's like, Silencio Bruno. No, that's not true. Like, that's just the fear talking to you. You know, like, you taught me that. And Luca's like, I'm gonna go win the race for us. So he heads back to the human town. He's got the scuba suit that Alberto was wearing when they first met, and he's got the bike that you see when they first walk onto the shore. And he decides, like, I'm gonna do the whole triathlon alone. And at first I was like, why does he have to be alone? Like, why can't he just join with Julia? Like, they're still friends. But I think the thing is, he feels like he has to enter it alone because the whole time he's always been telling other people to do things. Like, he has the ideas, but he can't act. Like, everyone has to act for him. His mom tells him not to leave. His mom's gonna send him away. Alberto has to ask Julia about the race. It's always like a little game of telephone with him. Like, he's got great ideas. He's always been limited to act. And so entering the race alone shows that he has shifted, and he is confident, and he is self-reliant. He can do things by himself. He doesn't need somebody else to approve it. So then he does the race, but he does need help. He wears a scuba suit for the swimming portion. He just walks it so that he doesn't transform into a sea monster at all. Hadn't practiced eating pasta, so Julia has to teach him really quick how to use the fork to eat the pasta. And then he does it. And then he's been training for the bike, so he does the bike really well. In the meantime, the parents are in the town looking for him. And they see him go by and they're like, wow, he's really good. But it starts to rain. Oh no, he's gonna be seen as a sea monster. But then we see this umbrella running past. And Alberto has come back with an umbrella so that he can finish the race, so that they can finish it together on the bike. But the bully is in the way and he's causing all kinds of trouble. Luca's hiding under this awning and Alberto can't really get to him. And then Alberto jumps on the rain to distract the bully, but then he gets caught in a net. It's raining, Luca doesn't have the umbrella, but his friend is in danger. And Luca has to decide either, like, do I stay human or do I save my friend who is clearly a sea monster out in the rain? So he decides to just drive his bike down the hill. Brave, brave, brave. Drive the bike down the hill, transforming into the sea monster. Everybody knows now that they're both sea monsters. He picks him up, puts him on the bike, and they finish the race together. It's so beautiful. So they win the race, they get the prize money, they buy the Vespa. Luca is like, I'm not going to school, Julia's going to school, but Julia's like, you can have my textbook. They go back into the house, they get the textbook. Alberto has this Vespa with him, and then the scene ends. Then we see Julia getting on the train for school. They're all saying goodbye. Luca goes up to Alberto and says, okay, time to go on our adventure with our Vespa. And Alberto's like, I sold it for a ticket so that you can go to school. And his parents are there too and say that they'll pay for school. And Luca's like, so you're coming with me? And Alberto's like, no, I'm gonna stay back here. But he's like, what the heck? We did all this together. Luca's like, well, what is Alberto gonna do? What are you gonna do? And Alberto's like, I'll be fine, you know, like you got me off the island. I'll be fine here. I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna help out Julia's dad. He's like, realizes their priorities are just different. You know, like Alberto just needs to belong somewhere and needs to be seen and needs to be, you know, not alone. And Luca has these big dreams of the world, you know. And then Luca's on the train and it's raining and he steps out and turns into a sea monster, like transforms back and forth. And Alberto is waving goodbye and he transforms back and forth. It's so sweet. That's how it ends. It's very sweet. It's like my catchphrase. It's very sweet. But that's the thing. Is like, so throughout the movie, you know, he views being a sea monster or human as two separate things for like a long, long time. And Alberto is this opposing force of like, I'm both all the time. Like, I'm both all the time. Like, sometimes a little bit to a fault. And Luca starts seeing it as merely a fault. When you're told all the time that you're bad or wrong or people hate you, you start to like feel that way yourself. And that's shown in this movie. Like, Luca doesn't really like himself. He's told like by everyone, by the town, by his mom, that like humans don't like you. You can't do stuff when you're a sea monster. And he's like, he doesn't fully believe it, but he fears it. And he lives that, and he lives in fear, and he can't fully do what he wants to do with that fear. Like, he falls off his bike when he's looking down. He falls off his bike when he's trying to avoid the fountain. But he also can't just dive head first because he might get hurt. You know, like, you have to have nuance in your action. It comes to a point where, like, sometimes, you know, like, there are perks to hiding yourself. You know, like, if you're in like a friend group and they really hate the Backstreet Boys and you love them, so you can't fully tell them that you love the Backstreet Boys to be in the group. And part of you knows that that's wrong, but part of you is like, but there's other perks to being in this group. They're helping me grow in various other ways. But then, you know, in order to fit in, sometimes you start to go against who you are and what you are. And you might even start saying like anti-Backstreet Boys slander because that's what the people around you are doing. But to be fully yourself, you have to be proud of being a Backstreet Boy fan. You know, you might not be one forever or something, but like, like stuff like that. But then by the end, he learns that to fully be brave and have the friends he has and be himself, he has to be both the sea monster and the human side of himself. Those are both him. He's not fully human, he's not fully sea monster, he's both. Both the sea monsters and the humans made up all this propaganda about each other, like that they're both vicious beasts. And they're both afraid of them. They both want to get rid of them, you know? Or not necessarily get rid of them, but like avoid them, you know? Like having the sea monsters around is scary to the humans. Having the humans around is scary to the sea monsters. There are scary humans. There are scary sea monsters. But there's a lot of really nice ones too. You know, you just have to find your place. You have to find people who accept you for you. And that's Luca's arc. Luca's so good. I think Luca is applicable to anybody who feels like they've had to hide parts of themselves to be accepted. It's just a really, really nice, heartwarming story of accepting yourself and having people around you accept you, proving to yourself that you can accomplish your goals and how the power was inside of you, but you can't achieve it without support, without love, without someone showing you the way. It's collaborative. It's a journey. It's a journey to self-acceptance. Beautiful message, beautiful animation, beautiful score, just a great movie, and it just exemplifies a character-driven story so simply, so succinctly, and so beautifully. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Mint Tea, and you've been you, and I had fun. Did you have fun? I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.